It's just past midnight on a quiet Limerick street. A burst of automatic gunfire shatters the silence. By dawn, a familiar headline repeats, "Another victim of the city's ruthless gang feud." Over 20 murders and countless shootings and pipe bomb attacks scarred Limerick during a decades-long war between two criminal clans. In this documentary, we chronicle the entire history of the Limerick gang feud, a gritty saga of hatred and retribution that transformed a city once nicknamed Stab City. Through cold, factual narration and suspenseful storytelling, we'll follow the feud's evolution from schoolyard spat to all-out gang war, examine key turning points, like the murders of Shane Geoghegan and Roy Collins, and reveal how determined policing and community courage finally brought a bloody era to heal. Limerick in the late 20th century struggled with poverty and crime. Desperate economic conditions in certain housing estates, like Moyross, Southill, St Mary's Park, bred unemployment, drug abuse, and gang activity. By the 1990s, media had unfairly branded Limerick Stab City due to its reputation for violence. It was in this climate that two former friends-turned-rivals would light the fuse of an infamous feud. Christy Keane, a major drug dealer and patriarch of the Keane-Collopy gang in St Mary's Park, had once been close allies with Eddie Ryan, his chief enforcer. But in 2000, their alliance imploded, reportedly sparked by a petty schoolyard incident. One day, a fight between their young daughters ended with one girl slashed in the face. This insult ignited a bitter personal rift. On November 10, 2000, as Christy Keane waited in his car outside his child's school, Eddie Ryan approached and leveled a handgun at him. Click, the gun jammed, and Keane sped off, narrowly escaping death. It was an omen of chaos to come. 2 nights later, revenge came swift and lethal. On November 12th, 2 masked gunmen stormed the Moose Bar on Cathedral Place, where Eddie Ryan, age 40, sat drinking. They opened fire, executing Ryan at point-blank range as patrons dove for cover. The assassins even sprayed the bar's facade with automatic gunfire on their way out, a brazen message that the feud had begun. Ryan's young son, who had stepped into the restroom moments earlier, was spared by pure chance. With Eddie Ryan dead, Limerick's criminal underworld split into factions. On one side stood Christy Keane and his Keane-Collopy gang, named for Christy and his allies, the Collopy family. On the other, Ryan's relatives allied with the McCarthy-Dundon gang, a rising crew from Ballinacurra Weston. The McCarthy-Dundon brothers, led by siblings Wayne, John, Desi and Gerard Gier Dundeen, had grown up in England and returned to Limerick in the 1990s, linking with their McCarthy cousins to build a lucrative drug network. Opportunistic and vicious, the McCarthy-Dundons secretly joined the Ryan faction despite once supplying guns to the Keanes in hopes of seizing control of Limerick's drug trade. This double dealing set the stage for one of the feud's most gruesome early chapters. January 2003, the double cross, Eddie Ryan's 2 sons, Eddie Jr., 20, and Kieran, 19, suddenly vanished, reportedly abducted by armed men on Moylish Road. Rumours swirled, had the McCarthy-Dundons kidnapped the Ryan brothers on Christy Keane's orders? In fact, it was an elaborate trap. Christy's brother Kieran Keane, a notorious gang figure, believed he had hired the McCarthy-Dundons to execute the Ryan brothers for $60,000. On January 29, 2003, Kieran Keane, aged 36, and his associate Owen Treacy, 25, were lured to a house in Garryowen to supposedly witness the Ryans' fate. Instead, they were jumped by a group of armed men. The captors bound and beat them, then drove them to a desolate country lane in Drombanna, 5 miles outside the city. In the icy darkness, Kieran Keane was stabbed repeatedly in the face, then shot execution-style in the back of the head. Owen Treacy was stabbed 17 times in the face, head, chest, and left for dead in the mud. Astonishingly, Treacy survived his horrific injuries and managed to crawl to a nearby house for help. The next morning, in a final twist, the Ryan brothers walked unharmed into a Garda station. Their kidnapping had been a ruse all along. The double cross was complete. Christy Keane's brother was dead, and the McCarthy-Dundon-Ryan alliance had eliminated a top Keane lieutenant in one masterstroke. Investigators swiftly homed in on the culprits. Later in 2003, 5 men from the McCarthy-Dundon side were convicted of Kieran Keane's murder and given life sentences. They included Desmond "Desi" Dundon, age 20, one of the infamous Dundon brothers, and Anthony "Noddy" McCarthy, 21, along with their cohorts James McCarthy, 24, David "Frog Eyes" Stanners, 31, and Christopher "Smokey" Costello, 20. At their trial, an atmosphere of triumphalism prevailed, as if being jailed for killing a rival was a badge of honor among these young men. Independent.I. Outside the courthouse, a teenage supporter brazenly wore a t-shirt declaring, "Keens are rats," a chilling public taunt that underscored the deep hatred fueling this war. As one Garda superintendent noted, the prime motivation in this feud is sheer and absolute hate by each side for the other. The carnage in Limerick only escalated after the double cross. With each retaliatory attack, the cycle of vengeance intensified. Throughout the mid-2000s, residential streets became war zones as tit-for-tat shootings, stabbings and pipe bombings rocked the city. Locals lived in terror of being caught in the crossfire. Notable flashpoints during these years included July 2003, Eddie Ryan's brother, John Ryan, 47, was gunned down outside a house in Thomondgate. 2 assassins on a motorcycle sped by and opened fire, killing him on the spot. The suspected shooters were barely out of their teens. Investigators believed 2 teenage gunmen carried out Ryan's murder, a sign that a new generation was being drawn into the feud. Independent.ie. October 2003, Michael "Mike" McNamara, 23, a Keane-Collopy gang member, vanished. His mutilated body was found dumped on waste ground in South Hill, bound, stabbed multiple times, and shot twice. The savagery sent a clear message that no mercy would be shown to enemies. 2006, Noel Crawford, 40, was shot dead in South Hill in a case of mistaken identity. The killers had meant to hit Noel's brother, a McCarthy-Dundon associate, but murdered the wrong man. This foreshadowed an even more tragic mistaken hit to come. Also in 2006, an unrelated feud incident saw 2 young children severely burned in Moyross after gang members firebombed a car, sparking national outrage and prompting government-funded regeneration efforts in Limerick's estates. Though separate from the Keane-McCarthy feud, it exemplified how innocence increasingly paid the price. By 2007, open warfare raged. Over 100 shootings were recorded in Limerick that year alone, many linked to the feud. Residential homes were riddled with bullets as gang members attacked each other's houses indiscriminately. Crude pipe bombs were lobbed at doorsteps. Drive-by shootings occurred at all hours. For Limerick's law-abiding citizens, daily life felt like living in a conflict zone. Garda responded with armed checkpoints and frequent raids, seizing over 250 firearms in 2 years. But the gangsters were undeterred. A senior police officer grimly observed that unlike typical criminals, these young men have no fear of dying and no hesitation in killing either. Self-preservation took a back seat to hatred. Each side was willing to risk everything to inflict pain on their rivals. Intimidation and social media. As the feud dragged on, intimidation became endemic. Families of gang members were threatened, witnesses were too afraid to testify. The gangs even flaunted their bravado on early social media, such as Bebo and Facebook, posting taunts and coded threats in an effort to cow enemies and bolster their own reputations. A climate of fear enveloped the city. Many residents felt hostage to the violence, afraid to speak out. One Garda operation report in 2004 warned that if the feuding didn't stop, those involved would die in prison or die on the streets. Neither side seemed to care. In the autumn of 2008, Limerick's feud produced its most shocking victim, an innocent man whose death finally stirred an entire nation. Shane Geoghegan was a 28-year-old local rugby player, described by friends as a decent guy liked by young and old alike. He had no connection to any gang. Shane's life revolved around sports, his job as an aircraft technician, and his fiancée. But on November 9, 2008, the feud claimed his life in a tragic case of mistaken identity. In the early hours of that Sunday, Shane was walking home in the suburban neighborhood of Doyle after watching a rugby match with friends. Meanwhile, a hitman lurking in the darkness had orders to kill a known Keane ally, Johnny McNamara, a drug dealer who lived on Shane Street. Johnny McNamara had already survived 3 assassination attempts. The gunman lay in wait. Then, spotting Shane in the dim light, a stocky man who unfortunately resembled the target, the hitman struck. A volley of gunfire shattered the quiet. Neighbors found Shane collapsed on the curb, shot multiple times. He died steps from his front door. The real target, John McNamara, was unharmed and only realized later that his friend Shane had been killed in his place. Limerick awoke that morning to national outrage. The murder of an innocent sportsman in a suburban estate, an attack reminiscent of something from Gangland, Chicago, horrified the Irish public. There were immediate comparisons to the 1996 slaying of journalist Veronica Guerin, a murder that had galvanized Ireland against the Dublin mobs. Shane Geoghegan's killing became a similar watershed moment for Limerick. Investigation and fallout. Garda launched a massive investigation, making dozens of arrests in the weeks after Shane's death. Barry Doyle, a 23-year-old dub working for the McCarthy-Dundon gang, was eventually charged as the shooter. In court, it emerged that the hit had been ordered by John Dundon, then 25, one of the feuding Dundon brothers. Dundon had allegedly given Doyle a photo and description of the target, Johnny McNamara, and supplied a gun and car. According to testimony from Dundon's former sister-in-law, April Collins, John Dundon had told the hitman in no uncertain terms, "The gun is there. You kill him." Doyle carried out the order, but killed the wrong man. In 2010, Barry Doyle stood trial for murder. The first jury deadlocked after a record 17 hours of deliberation. Doyle had recanted a confession, claiming it was coerced. A retrial in 2012 found Doyle guilty of Shane's murder, and he received the mandatory life sentence. Investigators then set their sights on the higher-ups. In August 2013, John Dundon was tried in the Special Criminal Court, a non-jury court typically reserved for terrorists, for ordering Shane's murder. April Collins bravely testified that Dundon celebrated prematurely on the night of the killing, bragging "Johnny Mac is dead," only to erupt in rage when a rival gangster informed him the wrong man was killed. The court found John Dundon guilty and sentenced him to life in prison on August 13, 2013. Equally significant was the political reaction to Shane Geoghegan's murder. The public demanded that authorities finally crush Limerick's gangs. Within weeks, Justice Minister Dermot Ahern introduced emergency legislation, the Criminal Justice Amendment Act 2009, targeting gang crime. Under these measures, those directing criminal organizations could be tried in the Special Criminal Court and face life imprisonment. Penalties for witness intimidation were boosted from 10 to 15 years, and Garda were given greater powers to hold suspects for up to 7 days. Essentially, the state repurposed laws once used against the IRA to go after Limerick's gangsters. It was a turning point, the beginning of the end of the Feud's reign of terror. Despite the uproar over Shane's murder, the McCarthy-Dundon gang struck back in the most cold-blooded way by targeting the family of a man who dared to stand up to them. Roy Collins was a 35-year-old pub and amusement arcade owner in Limerick, a hard-working father of 2. He wasn't involved in crime, but his family had crossed paths with the Dundons before. Roy's father, Steve Collins, had been one of the few brave citizens to testify against the gang. In 2004, Steve's testimony helped convict Wayne Dundon, the eldest Dundon brother, for threatening to kill an employee of Steve's pub over an unpaid extortion demand. The Collins family's cooperation with law enforcement made them marked targets in the eyes of the Dundon gang. On April 9, 2009, revenge came. That morning, Roy Collins was working at his business, Coin Castle Amusements, adjacent to the family pub in Roxborough. Around 12:30 p.m., a gunman walked up and shot Roy in the chest at point-blank range. As Roy collapsed, he managed to stagger toward the pub. His father Steve rushed to find him kneeling, bleeding heavily. Roy gasped, "I'm after being shot," before losing consciousness, as later recounted in court. He died shortly after, en route to the hospital. The murder of Roy Collins, another innocent, targeted out of sheer vindictiveness, stunned Ireland. It was the second high-profile slaying of an uninvolved citizen in 6 months. This time, the motive was naked retaliation, punishing the Collinses for defying the gang. Investigators soon uncovered that, from his prison cell, Wayne Dundon, aged 30, had orchestrated Roy's assassination. Wayne issued the kill order via smuggled cell phone, aiming to hit Steve Collins but murdering his son instead. The gunman, James Dillon, and getaway driver, Nathan Killeen, 23, were part of the McCarthy-Dundon crew. Public sentiment in Limerick reached a breaking point. The Collins family, in their grief, displayed extraordinary courage. Rather than cower, Steve Collins and his wife Carmel came forward, speaking out against the gangs. Under heavy Garda protection, they led anti-gang marches through Limerick streets, joined by thousands of residents outraged and grieving. The message was clear: the community would no longer be intimidated by thugs. As local TD, Member of Parliament Willie O'Dea put it, the stance Carmel and Steve took engendered an absolute determination by the state to take on these criminals in Limerick. The Collins family's bravery became a rallying cry. Years later, at Carmel Collins's funeral, this was remembered as the moment a city was changed. The authorities answered the call. In July 2014, the Special Criminal Court convicted Wayne Dundon and Nathan Killeen of Roy Collins's murder, based largely on the testimony of an ex-gang member turned state witness. Both received life sentences. Their appeals were denied in 2017. Steve Collins and his family, under constant death threat, had to enter a witness protection-like program and relocate from Limerick for several years to stay safe. The murder of Roy Collins ultimately became the final straw that unified the city against the gangs and spurred an unprecedented crackdown. From 2009 onward, Irish law enforcement threw the kitchen sink at Limerick's gangs. Multi-agency initiatives, with codenames like Operation Platinum, targeting gang finances in 2008, and later operations under the National Organised Crime Unit, poured resources into dismantling the feuding groups. The elite Garda Regional Support Unit and Emergency Response Unit set up armed checkpoints, conducted dawn raids, and made sweeping arrests. In one massive swoop in April 2013, over 250 Garda launched synchronized raids across Limerick, Clare, and Tipperary, seizing $250,000 in cash along with drugs and weapons. The Criminal Assets Bureau, CAB, also moved in to seize properties, luxury cars, and bank accounts linked to the gang bosses, hitting them in the pocket and in their wardrobes, as one report put it. Special police units, some wearing balaclavas and carrying submachine guns, became a common sight on Limerick streets, conducting aggressive stop and searches of known gang members. From 2007 to 2013, Garda effectively waged a counterinsurgency campaign against the feuding gangs. And it worked. One by one, the major players were taken off the streets on charges ranging from murder to extortion to drug trafficking. By 2013, the Limerick feud, as it had been known, was effectively over. Garda have been extremely successful at putting the feud to a stop, one account noted, citing a dramatic reduction in violence. The statistics told the story. Some 60 key figures from both sides were behind bars. In all, almost 30 gangland figures received prison sentences during this period. This included the top leadership. Dundon brothers Wayne, John, and Desi were all serving life for murder in separate cases, and brother Gerard Dundon was jailed on intimidation charges. Notorious hitmen like Barry Doyle, Shane Geoghegan's killer, were locked away for life. The rival Keane-Collopy faction was also decimated. For example, Kenneth Collopy, a younger boss on Christy Keane's side, got life in 2012 for murdering an innocent man. Perhaps most importantly, witnesses found the courage to come forward under enhanced protection. April Collins's testimony put John Dundon away. Other insiders flipped as well, providing intelligence that helped Garda thwart murder plots and seize weapons. Under the new laws, trials of gang suspects were held before judges only, no juries, to prevent intimidation. Longer sentences for directing a criminal organization and conspiracy to murder kept the worst offenders incarcerated or awaiting trial. The message was clear. Limerick's feuding gangs would no longer operate with impunity. By mid-2013, after over a decade of bloodshed, the feud's most violent phase had finally burned out. Limerick's murder rate plummeted, and the nightly shootings ceased. In the words of one local journalist, Limerick's feud, how it started and ended, could now be written. But the story doesn't quite end there. We turn now to the fates of the feud's central characters and the lasting impact on the city they once terrorized. Gerard Dundon, age 38. The youngest of the Dundon brothers, Ger was a juvenile when the feud began, just 15 in 2002, but he quickly accumulated a criminal record for violence and intimidation. In the late 2000s, Ger was known for lower-level roles. He infamously threatened nightclub staff and others, and he served several short prison stints in Ireland. He was imprisoned for violent disorder, then released in 2014. After the feud died down, Ger relocated to England, attempting to reinvent himself under a fake name, Darren McLean. But old habits followed. In 2020, Ger was involved in a kidnap and extortion plot in the UK, a scheme to hold two brothers for a $300,000 ransom. British police captured him in a dramatic armed stop. Ger tried to smash his phone to destroy evidence as officers swarmed his van. In May 2023, a London judge sentenced Ger Dundon to 15 years in prison for conspiracy to blackmail and false imprisonment. British authorities also nailed him on a firearms charge after finding a 9mm pistol at his London hideout. Once a baby-faced delinquent of the Limerick feud, Ger Dundon is now a convicted international criminal, not due for release until at least the late 2020s. Wayne Dundon, age 42. The de facto leader of the McCarthy-Dundon gang at its peak, Wayne was notorious for terrorizing Limerick's business owners and ordering murders. In 2004, he was convicted for threatening to kill a nightclub bouncer, who was shot dead by a Dundon associate. After serving that sentence, Wayne continued to pull strings. From prison in 2009, he ordered the assassination of Roy Collins, an act that finally sealed his fate. In 2014, Wayne was found guilty of Roy's murder. The court concluded he gave the order via phone from jail and handed a life sentence. As of 2025, Wayne remains imprisoned in a high-security facility. He is in his mid-40s and will likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. Wayne's iron-fisted reign over Limerick's south side is over, though he reportedly still tries to exert influence through associates on the outside. John Dundon, age 35. Impulsive and volatile, John was the younger Dundon brother who arrogantly believed he could get away with murder until he didn't. John was convicted of ordering Shane Geoghegan's murder and given a life sentence in 2013. In court, he was so dismissive that he listened to music on headphones during proceedings. Now in prison, John will be approaching middle age by the time he's eligible for any review, likely decades from now, if ever. His conviction was a signature victory for law enforcement, removing the man behind one of Ireland's most reviled killings, Desmond "Desi" Dundon, age 140. Another brother, Desi earned his infamy by participating directly in the Keane murder in 2003. Convicted and sentenced to life at age 20, Desi has been incarcerated since the mid-2000s. He too remains in prison to this day, one of the early casualties of the feud's tit-for-tat justice. If not for his imprisonment, Desi almost certainly would have either been murdered on the streets or continued the cycle of killing. Instead, he'll be locked up well into old age. Christy Keane, age 64, the man who was the initial target in 2000, survived multiple brushes with death. Christy, the patriarch of the Keane-Collopy faction, had built a drug empire in the 1990s and was no stranger to violence. After the feud quieted, Christy kept a relatively low profile. But in June 2015, the long memory of Gangland nearly caught up with him. As Christy Keane parked at the University of Limerick for a morning gym session, two masked gunmen ambushed him, firing multiple shots. Though hit several times in the upper body, the then 54-year-old Christy miraculously survived by diving behind his car and fleeing across a field. Investigators suspect that young hoods loyal to the McCarthy-Dundon Ryan faction were behind this attempted hit, essentially revenge deferred. Christy's survival only added to his near-legendary status on Limerick's streets. In the aftermath, he was hospitalized in critical condition, but pulled through. Today, Christy Keane remains a marked man and is reportedly under Garda watch whenever he's in public. Officially, he's a free man, having served past drug sentences, but the 2015 incident suggests he may still have been involved in the underworld, or at least perceived as a threat by rivals. Christie's continued existence is a reminder that the embers of the feud haven't completely died out. Edward "Eds" McCarthy, age 36, a cousin of the Dundons, Edward "Eds" McCarthy represents the next chapter of Limerick's gang saga. As the McCarthy-Dundon leadership was jailed, Eds McCarthy seized the opportunity to fill the power vacuum. Around 2011, Eds, then in his early 30s, relocated to Birmingham, England, essentially taking over the remnants of the Limerick gang and linking it with larger international networks. He forged alliances with infamous Irish cartel figures like Thomas "Bomber" Kavanagh and Liam Byrne, lieutenants of the Kinahan cartel. Under Eds, the Limerick crew turned its focus to drug trafficking on a global scale, shipping cocaine and laundering money through front businesses and even horse racing operations. A rural property in Combe de Clare with a private racetrack linked to Ed's gang was seized by CAB in 2016. By 2024, Edward McCarthy had risen high enough to become a target of Britain's National Crime Agency, NCA, which suspects him of coordinating major drug shipments and gun running. The NCA has been building a case to extradite Eds McCarthy to the UK for prosecution. Essentially, Eds exported Limerick's gangland enterprise overseas, joining forces with the Kinahan cartel's Super Gang in a bid to stay a step ahead of Irish authorities. As of 2025, Eds McCarthy remains at large, rumoured to be moving between Ireland, the UK, and mainland Europe, but very much on the radar of international law enforcement. His story is a testament to how the tentacles of Limerick's feud extended beyond Ireland, connecting with larger criminal networks. By the mid-2010s, the open warfare that had earned Limerick its Stab City moniker was essentially quelled. Murders and shootings plummeted. The city began to shed its unfair, violent reputation with renewed investment in housing, education, and community programs. A notable initiative was the Shane Geoghegan Trust, founded by Shane's family and sports figures, which engages at-risk youth in sports and creative activities as alternatives to crime. The ultimate legacy of the feud is perhaps a stronger civic spirit in Limerick, a resolve to never let such darkness take hold of the city again. And yet, has the violence truly ended? Officials warn that the feud's embers still smoulder. Many of the original gang leaders may be imprisoned or dead, but younger criminals, sometimes called gangland legacy players, continue to feud on a smaller scale. In recent years, a group known as the Keane-Collopy faction, the old rivals of the McCarthy-Dundons, has reportedly been involved in spats with a new generation of troublemakers. In 2020 and 2021, Limerick saw a rash of car bombings, arson attacks, and assaults reminiscent of the bad old days. As one local Garda source noted, the gang who filled the void left by the Dundon McCarthys have taken over. They're still dictating everything from prison, indicating that even behind bars, gang leaders attempt to pull strings. In 1 week of April 2025, Army EOD specialists were called out twice to defuse crude bombs left outside homes in Limerick's south side. Houses were firebombed and innocent residents injured as reckless new players tried to settle scores. It was an eerie throwback to the height of the feud, proving that while the old war was won, the battle against gangland violence is never truly over. The Limerick gang feud left an indelible mark on the city and Ireland as a whole. Over 15 years, the feud evolved from a personal clash between former friends into a full-blown criminal war that claimed at least 20 lives, among them innocent souls whose only crime was being in the wrong place or having the courage to do what was right. It forced innovations in law enforcement and legal strategy, as the state adapted methods used against terrorism to combat homegrown organized crime. It pushed a community to its brink, and then, in the Collins family and others, revealed extraordinary bravery and resilience that ultimately turned the tide. Today, Limerick is healing. The city's darkest days are taught as cautionary history, and community-led efforts strive to ensure that young people have alternatives to the path of violence. But the feud's lesson resonates far beyond Limerick. It's a stark reminder of how absolute hatred can spiral into carnage independent.ie, and how only a concerted stand by authorities and ordinary citizens together can break the cycle. In the end, the Limerick feud had no winners, only widows, graves, and a city scarred but still standing. The gang leaders who once swaggered with impunity now sit in concrete cells. Their reign of terror has been dismantled piece by piece by detectives' persistence and neighbours' refusal to be cowed. A community that was on its knees fought back and reclaimed its streets. Limerick's story is one of redemption hard won. The feud that once plunged the city into fear has, through its very horror, forged a stronger resolve that evil will not be allowed to triumph, so long as good people refuse to do nothing. The final chapter on the Limerick feud is still being written, but one truth stands clear. When a community stands up to crime, even the most vicious of feuds can, at last, be put to rest.